Many people spend their whole lives chasing love from others. They keep looking for it and do not see how it can harm them. This need for approval becomes a quiet prison made from their own desires. The universe does not care about feelings, and most people around anyone do not truly care about that person's well-being. These people display warmth through expressions and speech, offering declarations of unwavering devotion. Yet beneath these performances lies something far more sinister and calculating. The common belief suggests that receiving affection provides security and protection, when reality demonstrates precisely the inverse. Emotional investment creates patterns of behavior that become easily anticipated, leaving individuals exposed and easily read by those observing them. Each instance where someone permits another person to possess their deepest emotions, as though handling something delicate and breakable, that individual hands over weapons that will inevitably be turned against them. This betrayal arrives without exception, though its timing remains uncertain. The philosopher understood that romantic notions held no place in discussions of genuine human behavior, recognizing instead the fundamental characteristics defining our species: self-absorption, inconsistency, and capacity for harm. Individuals routinely commit acts of treachery, engage in psychological exploitation, and desert those they previously claimed to treasure whenever circumstances present temptation, invoke terror, or awaken covetousness within them. Affection functions not as protective armor, but rather as confinement, and those who continue pursuing it sacrifice any possibility of experiencing true autonomy. The reality presented tonight carries weight that most refuse to acknowledge. Receiving devotion from others does not constitute strength or dominance. Instead, it represents the ultimate form of helplessness and submission to forces beyond one's control. The instant someone ceases their pursuit of validation through others' emotions, they simultaneously terminate their state of being possessed by external forces. Societal conditioning begins at birth, systematically programming each person to hunger for validation from external sources, the need for guardian endorsement during childhood, the craving for companionship during adolescence, the desperation for romantic confirmation in adulthood. All these manufactured needs convince the developing mind that emotional reciprocation serves as sanctuary, defense mechanism, and ultimate prize worth any sacrifice. However, existence refuses to conform to fictional narratives, and human disposition possesses no inherent benevolence or mercy. The philosopher recognized that individuals who construct their lives around emotional dependency exist in a state of voluntary servitude from which escape becomes nearly impossible. Pursuing validation from others necessitates relinquishing authority over one's own trajectory and decisions. The seeker contorts themselves according to other people's expectations and appetites. They rationalize acts of disloyalty, tolerate degradation, and systematically lower their personal boundaries and principles. Every utterance expressing necessity for another's presence functions as an additional restraint, eliminating freedom of action and thought. Displaying vulnerability invites not compassion but opportunistic predation without exception. The more desperately someone seeks endorsement from their surroundings, the more completely others command dominion over their choices, emotions, and very identity. Genuine emotional reciprocation occurs far less frequently than people imagine or hope. This principle applies universally regardless of gender, background, or relationship type. The philosopher cautioned that humanity demonstrates consistent ingratitude, unreliability, dishonesty, and commitment to deception. During periods of prosperity and advantage, people maintain appearances of faithfulness and solidarity. However, when adversity arrives or circumstances shift unfavorably, these same individuals transform completely, revealing their true nature through abandonment and opposition. Every demonstration of care or dedication operates under unspoken conditions that can be revoked instantly. People may project dedication presently, but future developments or changing inclinations inevitably expose completely different realities beneath the surface. Blindly chasing emotional fulfillment means surrendering existence itself to unpredictable powers that no individual can ever truly manage or direct. Examine observable patterns throughout society and history carefully. Those who accumulate genuine influence, those who establish dominance within political spheres, commercial enterprises, or any domain where power concentrates do not build their position upon being recipients of affection. They command deference, establish authority, and when necessary, inspire apprehension in others. They comprehend that human beings operate primarily through self-interest and remain fundamentally unreliable entities. For these individuals, emotional connection never serves as refuge or foundation. Instead, it becomes an implement to be employed with calculation and precision. Affection gets distributed deliberately, in carefully measured quantities designed to secure allegiance. Depending upon others for emotional sustenance permits external forces to dictate the entire course of one's existence. This dependence exposes fundamental weaknesses and creates opportunities for ruthless exploitation by those who recognize the vulnerability. Individuals who prioritize seeking warmth above all else forfeit their independence, their ability to perceive reality accurately, and ultimately every source of personal power they possess. They transform into entirely foreseeable entities, easily controlled and fundamentally compromised. Within a reality governed by ambition, calculated maneuvering, and ruthless self-interest, such weakness guarantees destruction. The philosopher also declared that inspiring fear proves superior to receiving love, when possessing both simultaneously remains impossible. This statement should not be interpreted as encouragement toward brutality or sadism. Rather, it constitutes guidance toward self-protection and survival. Reliance upon affection creates a fundamental vulnerability in one's defenses. Many people spend their whole lives chasing love from others. They keep looking for it and do not see how it can harm them. This need for approval becomes a quiet prison made from their own desires. The universe does not care about feelings, and most people around anyone do not truly care about that person's well-being. These people display warmth through expressions and speech, offering declarations of unwavering devotion. Yet beneath these performances lies something far more sinister and calculating. The common belief suggests that receiving affection provides security and protection, when reality demonstrates precisely the inverse. Emotional investment creates patterns of behavior that become easily anticipated, leaving individuals exposed and easily read by those observing them. Each instance where someone permits another person to possess their deepest emotions, as though handling something delicate and breakable, that individual hands over weapons that will inevitably be turned against them. This betrayal arrives without exception, though its timing remains uncertain. The philosopher understood that romantic notions held no place in discussions of genuine human behavior, recognizing instead the fundamental characteristics defining our species: self-absorption, inconsistency, and capacity for harm. Individuals routinely commit acts of treachery, engage in psychological exploitation, and desert those they previously claimed to treasure whenever circumstances present temptation, invoke terror, or awaken covetousness within them. Affection functions not as protective armor, but rather as confinement, and those who continue pursuing it sacrifice any possibility of experiencing true autonomy. The reality presented tonight carries weight that most refuse to acknowledge. Receiving devotion from others does not constitute strength or dominance. Instead, it represents the ultimate form of helplessness and submission to forces beyond one's control. The instant someone ceases their pursuit of validation through others' emotions, they simultaneously terminate their state of being possessed by external forces. Societal conditioning begins at birth, systematically programming each person to hunger for validation from external sources, the need for guardian endorsement during childhood, the craving for companionship during adolescence, the desperation for romantic confirmation in adulthood. All these manufactured needs convince the developing mind that emotional reciprocation serves as sanctuary, defense mechanism, and ultimate prize worth any sacrifice. However, existence refuses to conform to fictional narratives, and human disposition possesses no inherent benevolence or mercy. The philosopher recognized that individuals who construct their lives around emotional dependency exist in a state of voluntary servitude from which escape becomes nearly impossible. Pursuing validation from others necessitates relinquishing authority over one's own trajectory and decisions. The seeker contorts themselves according to other people's expectations and appetites. They rationalize acts of disloyalty, tolerate degradation, and systematically lower their personal boundaries and principles. Commanding respect, strategic cultivation of wariness in others, and maintaining emotional distance ensure that no external party can establish control. When personal happiness, self-assurance, or sense of identity depends upon receiving warmth or approval from another, that dependence places someone entirely at the mercy of external forces beyond their control. The moment that source withdraws its blessing, complete destabilization occurs immediately. This philosophical approach does not demand complete abandonment of human connection or relationships. The philosophy never intended to eliminate all interpersonal bonds. Its focus centers upon achieving mastery over these dynamics rather than becoming enslaved by them. Warmth, emotional connection, and faithful dedication can serve as useful instruments, but they must never evolve into requirements or dependencies. Sufficient investment gets provided to preserve influence and maintain productive alliances, but never in quantities that compromise personal autonomy or independence. Every individual must establish themselves as the ultimate authority governing their own existence. Grasping this principle represents the initial step toward mastering emotional detachment. Recognize that affection should never be perceived as a reward or prize. Instead, it functions as an examination, a trial assessing strength, independence, and discernment. Those who compromise themselves for the sake of receiving warmth fail this test completely. Those who observe situations carefully, calculate probabilities accurately, and maintain detachment successfully pass this crucial evaluation. Detachment must not be confused with hostility or cruelty toward others. It represents clarity of perception, the ability to perceive individuals as they genuinely are, rather than as one wishes or imagines them to be. It means preserving personal power regardless of whatever emotions others attempt to project upon you or invoke within you. The world does not provide rewards for dependency or emotional need. Once someone places their worth and value into another's possession, freedom ceases to exist entirely. Sovereignty disappears completely. That person becomes a marionette performing according to other people's desires, deceived by superficial warmth, rendered sightless by temporary comfort. Only through detachment, through absolute refusal to surrender autonomy in exchange for transient affection, can anyone maintain genuine influence and control over their circumstances. This philosophy does not concern itself with hating love or rejecting connection entirely. It focuses upon mastering these forces rather than being mastered by them. Receiving devotion does not equate to possessing power or authority. Chasing after emotional validation functions as an elaborate trap. Those who endure and prosper, as the philosopher instructed, acquire the skill of detachment. They value themselves above the changeable whims and desires of others, observing human nature with unclouded perception and moving through existence untethered. Remember this fundamental truth. Those who compromise themselves for affection will always function as prey for those more ruthless. Those who master detachment gain authentic freedom and autonomy. The decision lies with each individual to make consciously. Human nature functions as a predator concealing its true intentions, and affection serves as the lure drawing victims closer. Most individuals conceptualize emotional warmth as a gift, evidence of loyalty, a haven promising safety and security. Their understanding remains fundamentally incorrect and dangerously naive. Affection represents the most ingenious weapon ever developed precisely because it disguises intention while simultaneously exposing vulnerability in its target. Every human being who expresses affection carries within them a duality. One aspect genuinely seeks connection and belonging, while another aspect exploits opportunities for personal advantage. Few people recognize which aspect dominates until circumstances have already progressed beyond the point of recovery. Consider carefully the relationships that have received trust throughout life. Friends, romantic partners, even blood relatives, all of them leverage the need to be loved in subtle and overt ways that often escape notice. Subtle compliments, gentle words of praise, commitments whispered during vulnerable moments. These are not spontaneous acts of generosity or selfless giving. They are calculated maneuvers designed to shape behavior in specific directions. The objective remains simple and unchanging. Render the target compliant, predictable, and dependent upon the source of affection. When a person establishes control over another's desire for love, they control that person's actions and choices completely. Even the smallest gestures carry significant power that accumulates over time. A well-timed compliment, physical contact, a brief moment of focused attention. These function as deposits into an emotional account, credits that can later be withdrawn to demand compliance or enable manipulation. This system of domination operates quietly, remaining almost invisible to those subjected to it until they find themselves completely ensnared. Individuals who believe affection can exist without conditions remain blind to reality and its harsh mechanisms. Every expression of emotional warmth carries implications and weight. Every promise conceals some hidden motivation or agenda, and those who lack experience never perceive the deception until it has already succeeded completely. The philosopher warned that appearances constitute power in themselves and must be carefully managed for maximum advantage. Contemporary society surrounds people with illusions of genuine affection at every turn. Digital messages, social media validation, minor gestures all create the false impression that someone possesses genuine concern for well-being. However, concern costs nothing and remains cheap in abundant supply. Attention proves fleeting and temporary, shifting rapidly between targets. Genuine loyalty exists as an extreme rarity, almost extinct in modern times. Those who manipulate emotional need do not require hatred for their targets or any particular malice toward them. They need only maintain indifference toward the dependency they have cultivated and nurtured intentionally. Within this reality, indifference proves more deadly than active malice because it operates without detection or warning signs that might alert the victim. Detachment serves as the cure for this vulnerability and the key to liberation. When the pursuit of love ceases entirely, manipulators lose their primary source of leverage immediately and completely. The person becomes enigmatic, an unpredictable force that cannot be easily controlled through conventional emotional manipulation. People who previously held influence over emotions lose their power, not through direct confrontation or conflict, but through absence of emotional investment that they can exploit. This absence creates terror in those who rely upon control to maintain their position and influence. Humans instinctively fear what defies prediction, what resists their influence and escapes their understanding. Strategic thinking becomes crucial at this juncture and determines all future outcomes in relationships and power dynamics. The philosopher taught rulers to project strength while concealing true intentions from potential enemies and allies alike. Apply identical principles to emotional dynamics without exception. Let affection be earned through demonstrated value rather than distributed freely. Let loyalty face rigorous testing before being granted fully and completely. Let desire for your presence exist according to your terms exclusively and without compromise. Not every smile deserves reciprocation or acknowledgement. Not every compliment requires a response or validation. Treat the heart as a fortress under constant threat from those who would breach its walls. Those who attempt to breach its defenses must prove their worth through consistent actions over time, or fail in their attempt and be rejected. This approach transforms relationships from zones of vulnerability into strategic alliances built on solid ground. Consider what inevitably happens when ignoring this critical principle in practice. The naive, those who distribute love freely and desperately without discrimination or judgment, face exploitation repeatedly throughout their lives in various forms. Their generosity transforms into a leash controlling their movements and limiting their choices. Every act of care they provide becomes a deposit into someone else's account, a credit that can be claimed to manipulate, control, or abandon them whenever convenience dictates without remorse. Love without detachment becomes a weight, an obligation never consciously accepted but imposed gradually. Yet detachment does not require cruelty or cold-heartedness toward others necessarily. It represents clarity above all, a recognition that affection functions as currency in human exchanges. The individual determines its value and exchange rate based on demonstrated worth. Connection will still occur naturally. Love will still be experienced genuinely. Care will still be expressed appropriately. However, these will occur from a position of sovereignty rather than subjection to another's will. Intentions will be observed with surgical precision. Motives evaluated with cold logic untainted by sentiment. An action will only be taken when it serves personal purpose or cultivates inner peace. This mastery transforms how others perceive and respond fundamentally. Those surrounding detect this shift immediately and instinctively without being told explicitly. People who previously assumed easy access to emotional vulnerability suddenly find themselves outside protective barriers. Desperate for attention they once took for granted. Anxious about silence they cannot interpret. Fear operates subtly in this context. It does not announce itself through loud roars or obvious threats, but through presence of danger that could manifest at any moment without warning. Within this new reality, love itself bends to strategic intention rather than weakness or desperate need. Understanding the terrifying subtlety of this dynamic proves crucial for survival and success. Manipulators. do not reveal themselves through villainous expressions or threatening language that would expose their intentions clearly. They operate within shadows, smiling warmly while steadily tightening control over desires and dependencies. They rely upon addiction to love to predict behavior patterns with remarkable accuracy. Breaking this addiction liberates the mind from invisible chains that bind most people throughout their entire lives in perpetual servitude. The transformation happens gradually but irreversibly once begun with serious intent. Former sources of manipulation discover their tactics no longer function as expected. Attempts to invoke guilt, shame, or obligation meet with indifference rather than the expected compliance and submission. This reversal creates confusion among those accustomed to wielding emotional leverage effortlessly. They recognize something fundamental has shifted, but cannot identify precisely what changed. This uncertainty breeds respect tinged with caution. The person who has mastered detachment moves through social landscapes differently. Relationships form on terms established consciously rather than unconsciously accepted. Boundaries get enforced consistently without apology. Time and energy get invested strategically in people who demonstrate authentic value. The instant removal from someone's cognitive landscape renders an individual incomprehensible to them. Certainty crumbles within their minds. Authority dissolves into nothingness. Victory arrives not through combat, but through deliberate refusal to participate in their manufactured contest. Comprehend this ultimate reality now. Emotional distance terrifies precisely because it defies biological programming. The vast majority of humanity exists in perpetual addiction to validation, enslaved by their hunger for external endorsement. They cannot fathom existence beyond this dependency, cannot imagine thriving in its absence. Stepping beyond this endless loop positions someone in territory simultaneously desirable and perilous. Invulnerability emerges from requiring nothing from external sources. Yet observation, measurement, and potential elimination remain constant possibilities in this exposed state. Humanity possesses no inherent faithfulness. Allegiance manifests purely through circumstantial advantage. Warmth appears when utility presents itself. Generosity emerges when personal benefit beckons, and dedication persists exclusively while desires align favorably. Countless voices fill ears with declarations of perpetual commitment and unwavering devotion. However, the philosopher grasped fundamental reality. Human essence embodies selfishness, unreliability, and latent menace. Extending trust without skepticism constitutes surrendering existence to impossible odds. Contemplate those perceived as genuinely caring, romantic connections, companions, biological kin. Scrutinize their conduct meticulously. How frequently do behaviors prioritize another's welfare over personal gain? How regularly does expressed sentiment fluctuate according to external conditions, internal states, or arising prospects? Romantic attachment, companionship, faithfulness all represent brittle fabrications, illusions maintained exclusively during periods of mutual convenience. When difficulties intensify, when anxiety escalates, when advantageous possibilities materialize, most reveal authentic identities. Self-serving participants navigating an existence owing them absolutely nothing whatsoever. The most unsettling dimension of this reality resides in its imperceptible nature. Disloyalty seldom announces arrival. Concealment occurs behind grins, amusement, and demonstrations of concern. Precisely those individuals considered dependable may desert, scheme against, or mislead when personal requirements demand it. They execute these actions without conscience because within their perception, nobody ever represented more than an instrument of personal convenience. The universe disregards individual suffering entirely, and so do they. This explains why reliance upon human sentiment constitutes danger. Every connection forged constructs invisible leverage against the self. Every anticipation projected onto another becomes a point of exposure. Each moment spent pursuing affection or endorsement broadcasts fundamental weakness. Humanity instinctively gravitates toward exploiting frailty. The craving for belonging represents the most transparent deficiency anyone carries through existence. Continuation therefore demands emotional separation. Not heartlessness pursued for its intrinsic value, but lucidity. Recognizing others' inconsistency does not mandate total rejection. It demands arming oneself with comprehension. Watch, dissect, and absorb recurring behavioral patterns within humanity. Notice who provides assistance exclusively during simplicity, who vanishes during adversity, and who verbalizes devotion while acting contradictorily. This surveillance becomes protective covering, navigational guide, and offensive capability. Deception by charisma or tenderness should not occur. Sentiment can be practiced, allegiance can be staged, and regret can be manufactured. Humanity masters the art of deception. What provokes terror is not betrayal's possibility, but its execution without pause the instant it satisfies personal appetites. The emotional core is not sacred refuge. It represents contested ground. Within every conflict, the inexperienced suffer initial casualties. The instruction proves harsh, yet empowering simultaneously. Diminishing dependency upon others' capricious sentiments generates strength. When validation pursuit ceases, when affection hunting stops, movement occurs beyond foreseeable patterns of human predation. External approval no longer determines internal completeness. Others' focus no longer dictates perceived potency. Transformation into an entity they cannot anticipate, cannot influence, and cannot dominate occurs. This does not guarantee immunity from anguish. Humanity will continue disappointing. Sentiment will persist in betraying. However, internalizing their fundamental self-centeredness renders suffering manageable. Devastation no longer occurs because comprehension reveals natural order rather than targeted assault. Their faithlessness does not mirror personal value. It mirrors human composition. Grasping this truth liberates completely. Liberation in this context terrifies those existing dependent upon affection. They cannot comprehend tranquil detachment from someone who confronted truth and departed unchanged. They label it frigid, remote, or unfeeling. Reality reveals mastery instead. Dominance over anticipation. Dominance over appetite. Dominance over emotional turbulence imprisoning most individuals like captives. Survival demands embracing this brutal reality. Humanity embodies selfishness, inconsistency, and unpredictability. Those trusted most deeply may disappoint. Those loved most intensely may mislead. Those admired most profoundly may deceive. No assurances exist, no protective measures, and no promises that benevolence receives reciprocation. Accepting this reclaims personal sovereignty. Rejecting it perpetuates pawn status within competitions where every participant pursues exclusively personal interests. Once the world becomes visible in authentic form, nothing appears secure, nothing appears lasting, yet invulnerability manifests. While others remain enslaved through attachment, free movement occurs through observation, comprehension, and mastering the very disorder threatening everyone else. Not every hunter displays prominent teeth. Some display smiles, some produce laughter, some murmur romantic declarations with authenticity, capable of deceiving even the most discerning. The most hazardous individuals are those weaponizing sentiment, disguising exploitation within warmth and appeal. They avoid announcing intentions. Operations occur in obscurity, watching, evaluating, and attacking during maximum vulnerability. Survival requires perceiving them before they perceive you. Initial indication manifests as inconsistency. Monitor behaviors, disregard verbalizations. Verbalizations lack substance. They suffer easy manipulation, rehearsal, and performance. Behaviors conversely expose genuine intent. Manipulators promise faithfulness yet act selfishly when circumstances favor it. They discuss commitment yet disappear when difficulties emerge. Minor betrayals, repeated patterns of convenience constitute the evidence they abandon. Overlooking them invites catastrophe. Emotional manipulation represents another strategy. Conscience exploitation, pity cultivation, excessive praise. These constitute instruments bending targets toward their objectives. They probe limitations cautiously initially to determine exploitation possibilities. Those relying upon manipulation prey upon validation requirements. They recognize that when affection gets demanded, rationality suspends. Every apology, every declaration of concern, every benevolent action may conceal calculated strategy. Identify underlying patterns. The facade fractures under close observation. Domination operates subtly. The predator rarely compels directly. They pressure. They mold decisions through dependency creation, exploiting connection needs. They isolate emotionally, dispensing affection as compensation for compliance. Every decision suffers influence from their invisible guidance, frequently without conscious awareness. Recognizing this restores authority. Stepping beyond their network creates invulnerability. Monitor responses to your withdrawal. Genuine companions or allies respect independence. Manipulators experience panic, interrogate, or attempt dragging back into dependency. Their charm amplifies. Their flattery multiplies. Their coercion escalates. Anxiety serves them well. They wield it masterfully. Identify it. Oppose it. Let separation serve as defense. Those fearing lost influence over you represent precisely those who would abuse affection without hesitation. Limitations serve as armament. The predator challenges them ceaselessly. They will advance, examine, and beg to discover what gets permitted. Every compromise diminishes strength. Every enforced boundary increases strength. Emotional limitations must be treated as strongholds. Do not surrender to flattery, conscience manipulation, or commitments. Stronger boundaries create less vulnerability. Separation differs from apathy. It represents alertness. Comprehend psychology behind predators. They flourish on need. They derive fulfillment from domination, authority, and exploitation. Their charm, their warmth, their focus, all function strategically. Survival demands neutralizing the competition. Through refusing participation, through refusing to desire affection, through refusing predictable reactions, their advantages vanish. They cannot manipulate what resists influence. Yet knowledge alone proves insufficient. Implementation becomes necessary. Create distance from those wielding affection as weaponry. Watch without attachment. Participate without necessity. Bond without capitulation. The instant relationships get treated as voluntary transactions rather than survival necessities. Movement beyond emotional predators' reach occurs. Prey status terminates. Predator status and personal right emerges, walking undetected through a reality of unseeing hunters. The terrifying truth reveals most humanity will never grasp this. They exist as pawns, pursuing affection desperately, distributing it freely, and becoming manipulation victims repeatedly. Few can exit the cycle. Fewer still possess courage, accepting human nature's darkness and embracing detachment's clarity. However, those succeeding, those mastering themselves, acquire unparalleled authority, the capability navigating the human wilderness unharmed. Watch, identify, protect, separate. These represent survival steps within a reality where sentiment functions as currency, and every relationship constitutes a battlefield. Those failing to perceive predators behind grins pay through heartbreak, disloyalty, and squandered existence. Those succeeding, those comprehending human desires machinery acquire liberation, domination, and mastery's terrifying tranquility. Ultimate authority in human relationships is not dominating others. It is dominating oneself. When affection pursuit stops, when heart distribution freely ceases, a mastery level few ever accomplish unlocks. Most people imprison themselves through desire, endlessly pursuing validation, sentiment, or endorsement. However, transformation into untouchable status occurs because necessity no longer defines identity. Separation is not vacancy, it represents lucidity, the capability of observing human conduct without becoming trapped by it. Recognition that people embody selfishness, fickleness, and opportunism, and their sentiment rarely exists unconditionally. Internalizing this truth begins revealing patterns invisible to the naive. Deception becomes transparent. Manipulation becomes discoverable. Intentions behind every grin, utterance, or contact get exposed. Knowledge transforms into weaponry. Detachment transforms into shielding. The emotional core transforms into fortress. Mastery emerges from embracing human nature's terrifying reality. Romantic attachment, companionship, faithfulness. These constitute currencies, not certainties. Those attempting control through them depend upon your dependency. They manipulate connection needs, exploiting every weakness. However, when needs chains get severed, power gets stripped from them. They may attempt temptation, conscience exploitation, or manipulation, but your detachment renders you unpredictable, uncatchable, and dangerous in personal right. Observe existence like a tactician. Each interaction, each relationship represents a piece on strategic boards. Do not surrender moves freely. Do not permit sentiment dictating selections. Participate when it serves purposes. Retreat when it does not. Every connection should enhance positioning. Never compromise it. The instant affection gets treated as implement rather than necessity. Ascension above predictable disorder trapping the weak occurs. Detachment's clarity intoxicates. Suddenly, truth behind every utterance becomes visible. Calculation behind every gesture. Agenda behind every compliment. Most people never perceive it. They remain sightless, enslaved to cravings. However, liberation exists. Betrayal fear disappears because investment in illusion ceases. Affection begging stops because fleeting transactional nature gets understood. Approval necessity vanishes because power exists intrinsically, rooted in self-mastery. This mastery transforms perception. Others detect it instantly. Those once attempting manipulation suddenly hesitate. Those seeking heart control falter in presence. Detachment communicates strength, independence, and unpredictability. The most subtle yet terrifying power forms. Within a reality where most suffer shackling by desire, freedom becomes weaponry itself. However, this is not arrogance. It represents vigilance. Mastery requires constant awareness, constant observation, and constant self-discipline. The human wilderness fills with predators disguised as allies, hunters masquerading as companions, and charm concealing brutality. Navigation must occur with precision, letting neither desire nor anxiety cloud judgment. Stronger detachment creates greater invulnerability. Not because others lack strength, but because removal from their control sphere occurred. Upon reaching this level, affection ceases functioning as trap and becomes implement. Sentiment, connection, and faithfulness no longer serve as manipulation levers. They become opportunities wielding influence, strengthening positioning, and operating strategically within a reality of blind desperation. Human weakness has transformed into authority. Anxiety has transformed into clarity, disorder into structure, and dependency into liberation. Remember this fundamental principle. Those pursuing affection remain predictable. Those craving approval suffer exploitation. Those distributing hearts freely become prey. Contrarily, whoever masters detachment walks unseen, acts deliberately, and observes without becoming ensnared. Within this dark clarity, untouchable status manifests. The predator disguised as tranquility emerges, the tactician who moves while others stumble sightlessly, and the sovereign of personal emotional domain. If anything has been absorbed from this journey, let it be this. Stop pursuing affection. Stop seeking validation. Stop surrendering your emotional core to others' capriciousness. The world embodies cruelty. Human nature embodies selfishness. Liberation gets claimed exclusively by those brave enough embracing darkness and ascending beyond it.